So talk to me about the Texas Supreme Court. We hear about it in school. You learn about it in 7th grade when you do Texas history. And then we see headlines, certain opinions that are handed down ever so often. But I don't think people really take the time to fully understand what y'all's function is when it comes to our state government. So in your words, tell me what your job is.
Well, I'm glad to answer that question. And I think it's probably good that the Texas Supreme Court isn't in the headlines all that often, because that means that we're doing our job. And our job is to tell the people of Texas what their law is, not to change it, not to update it or modify it, but simply to say in a lawyerly way, here's what the words on these pieces of paper mean. And sometimes there's a lot of words on a lot of papers, and it can be a statute or a bunch of contracts or a complicated will with a bunch of codicils. But ultimately what the law is, it's something that's been written out by people, legislators, members of Congress, private parties drafting a contract. And the job of the courts is to say what it is. And we don't always love what it is. Sometimes we really hope that the legislature is going to come back. You're going to send your members from here in Midland back to Austin, and they'll pass a law and they'll change the effect of our ruling. And we will applaud sometimes, and we'll follow the new law too, because all we have the power to do, the people of Texas don't choose us for anything other than applying the current law. And sometimes people think, well, boy, we see about the U.S. Supreme Court or the federal courts or even the Supreme Court of Texas, and we assume that because important issues that matter to us are going before those courts, that the judge's job is to decide really how should Texas be governed. And the message I really have for people all across the state, here in Midland and everywhere, is that the people of Texas are a self-governing people. We're supposed to govern ourselves, not have judges or anyone else make the decisions for us. And the way you do that is you vote, and you choose people who are going to represent your interests, and they change the law, but you don't pick judges for that. You pick judges because you think they're going to have the ability and the integrity to follow what the words meant when they were written, because that's what they still mean. That's the nature of law. If somebody wants to change it, don't look to me, in other words. Don't look to my colleagues. We're not going to do it. We shouldn't do it, and you shouldn't want us to do it. Instead, you should want us to just say what it is, and then you guys, the rest of our fellow citizens, the other 29,999,991, if there are 30 million of us, that's the job of the rest, to update our law.
That was impressive, by the way. I don't think I could have, I'm not a numbers, I read a teleprompter for a living. What has been one of the more memorable opinions that the Supreme Court has handed down, in your time on the court?
Every single opinion that we hand down is going to be memorable to me because I have studied in great detail, as all of the other 8 justices, and they might affect only, it would seem, one family or one company. So I could mention pretty much every single one that we've had, but instead what I want to tell you about is why they're all important to everyone. And even if it's a case that's about a single family's divorce or a child custody dispute or a question of property usage, whether one person gets to build on this particular lot, that might seem like it doesn't matter to anybody else, but every decision that the Supreme Court of Texas hands down actually affects all 30 million Texans in all 254 counties, because the reason we take a case is to try to provide clarity to the larger law. And so when we issue an opinion, that's the precedent that binds every other court in Texas. And it binds the activities and the decisions and the planning that every citizen of Texas undertakes. And so every case matters, and that's why we have a Supreme Court, in order to try to bring clarity and uniformity. Every region of Texas has a court of appeals. There are 14 courts of appeals, and that you might think would be enough, but we need one more court at the top to be able to make sure that the law isn't different in Midland than it is in Houston or Austin or El Paso or Fort Worth or Amarillo. We have to make sure that Texas law means the same thing to everyone, and that's really what our job is.
So y'all hear cases that, from child custody, property tax, whatever it might be, all the way up to even bigger cases? Y'all hear a little bit of everything, I guess.
A bit of everything. I mean, we're the highest civil court in Texas. Okay. So we hear, employment law cases, energy law cases. Those are just 2 that start with E. But you can go all the way from the whole beginning to the end of the alphabet, and you'll find something that will affect every single Texan, ranging from those family law questions to oil and gas production, all the way to big multi-billion-dollar contracts, political law questions, election cases.
You've been busy with that.
We've been busy with all of these things. And the question about during the pandemic. You know, there's a lot of legal questions that we have to consider. And again, our job isn't to decide, do we like the policy that this local government or that the state has adopted? Our job in all of these cases is to make sure that if someone wants to exercise power over a citizen of Texas, that person has to show where in the Constitution and where in a valid statute of our state that power comes from. And that's the role of a judge. We might love what that person did, but if they're not authorized to do it, we can't approve it. And we might hate what somebody does, but if the Constitution gives that person, that official, the power to make that decision, we have no choice but to allow that to happen, because that's part of what self-government is. The judiciary isn't here to solve every problem, it's to say what the law is.